Man, oh man, what did I get myself into? Hey guys, OGalbina here, bringing you guys more of a discussion type video today. I don't know if you guys have been around for a while, and if you have, you might remember some videos I did based on tweets that I let out to kind of gauge, your guys' thoughts on different draft league questions and things like that, or hypotheticals and stuff like that. We're going to bring back one of those today, and a pretty interesting topic because it's something that, has a lot of volatility, and, what people will end up answering and thinking is, a correct answer, I suppose. I asked the people, you guys on Twitter, in your opinion, what is the most overhyped Pokemon in the draft format? Whether you think people think it's better than it is, it's priced too high. Again, pretty subjective, and what overhyped to you really is. Overhyped, overrated, I kind of see them as the same thing. But, the first tweet you see, Shuckle King, doesn't necessarily. So, and I thought I'd get some fun responses. I did not think I would get the amount that I got. I got something like 35 replies to the tweet. Now, obviously, some of those are repeats, people saying the same mod, so we're not going to run over the same mods multiple times. But this will make for a really long and interesting video. I'll kind of give my thoughts. I'll talk about the ones that I do think are overrated, the ones I think hey, I think you're wrong. This is why. I'm going to be respectful, of course. But I want to at least, kind of give my perspective on these things and why I think a Pokemon like this is or is not going to be overrated. So, before I jump into it, if you guys could, I'd really appreciate if you both dropped a like and sub to this sub to the channel. It's really easy, completely free, helps me out a ton in pushing towards my goals of 700 is my next immediate goal, and helping Clug along that way. So if you could help me out, I would really appreciate it a ton. And yeah, let's get into it. Grab some popcorn. It's gonna be a long video, man. So personally, I could start with mine, and a lot of people agreed with me. And I said Terrakion. This is a Pokemon that I used to decently, draft a decent amount. And I did decently like it in Gen 7, and I'll kind of talk on why I liked it in that generation more than I like it here in Gen 8. But I'll even read word for word what I said in my tweet. I said, for me, it's definitely Terrakion. Don't think it's bad or anything, but it feels like it always seems to miss out on important KOs. If it's not a boosting item, and if it's not Scarf, it's revenge so easily. Maybe that's just a personal experience. Let me know what you guys think. I know I had a bunch of people kind of agree with me, like, hey, Terrakion's not that good. It's a Pokemon where I really do feel like with that base 108 speed tier, it's really lacking bulk stats and things like that. It's very liable to get revenge if not, a Choice Scarf variant. If it's not a Choice Scarf variant, one, it's a lot easier to pivot around, and two, it's just not hitting those same KOs and 2-hit KOs that it would be hitting otherwise. It's just scary. With like a Swords Dance or just a raw Life Orb or Band variant or something like that. So I definitely don't think Terrakion's bad. Like, I'm not saying don't draft in your draft league. I think maybe I just need to lower my expectations for it when drafting, because I think it's gonna put the team on its back a little bit more, like some other top tier fighting types that I really do enjoy. Maybe it's the lack of momentum that it doesn't have. I think maybe if and again, it makes sense thematically for it to not have momentum, but I think maybe if it did end up getting momentum, I would be a little bit more likely to be a big Terrakion fan. But who knows? Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. Next up, we'll talk about the first tweet, though. We have Shuckle King, and Shuckle decided that all of the good Pokemon are all bad. So, actually, let's wait for Shuckle later, because I feel like if I talk about all these Pokemon in one tweet, I won't get to look at other people's tweets. So, we'll come back and we'll touch on the ones that he said that other people did not, because there definitely are some. Urshifu Single Strike from Redikai right here. Urshifu Single Strike, just Graph Comfey. A 2-hit KO after Stealth Rock. I mean, provided you're not leftovers, but you could be Helmet or something like that. Obviously, Draining Kiss is going to nuke you, or it's going to do a ton back, especially if you're Helmet. I believe Helmet into Kiss will kill, but still, that's not a check. Urshifu, I'm not as big and heavy on like Band Train. We need to get rid of Urshifu. It's broken in Standard. But I think to say it's anything lower than the second best Pokemon in the format is pretty crazy. But this obviously could be just a very either a very hot take or a very he's just trying to bait us a little bit, and that could definitely be fair. Speaking of number 2 in the format, let's talk about number 1 and Badass Velocis saying Pult. Definitely feel like it's a top tier, but I just don't personally think I'd draft it in like the top 10. It's just not as strong as I would want it to be. Plus, no physical ghost stab hurts a lot. I know there was someone else that was really big on this, and it was Vivid, and we'll talk about that as well. He said Agree Track sucks, so he's a smart man there, because Terrakion does suck. It was really good in Gen 6 draft, but it's been underwhelming since then. That's just via, power creep and stuff like that. Also, Dragapult, I fully believe is the most overhyped Pokemon in Gen 8 draft. I think Pult is such a strong mom, and certainly a round 1 pick, but seeing it go round 1 pick 1 in the draft is insane to me. My opinion of it would drastically change. It had decent physical ghost attack and Same plot, but I think there are better Gloopons. I'm going to disagree. I think a lot of people, you hear a lot of people argue 1 versus 2 and like Urshifu, Dragapult, and a lot of these, these guys are actually definitely saying even lower than number 2. I think Urshifu is seen as a little bit more broken because I feel like it has a little bit lower of a skill ceiling. You bring it in, you click a button, and that's what Urshifu does. And it does it really well. Pult, I think what people really lack to see is that base 142 speed stat on top of the best offensive typing in the game in Ghost this generation, as well as having, a very, very versatile move pool, as well as, the ability to really play with this thing's EVs and be really, really creative in the team builder with it. You don't have to, as good as it is, you don't have to be Shadow Balls, Draco Meteor, like flamethrowers and like that U-turn specs. You can be Willow, you can be T-Wave, you can be DD, you can be mixed, you can have, screens, and it can be a great facilitator of your offense. So I don't think that this Pokemon is necessarily going to come in, click a button, kill something every single time. And in some matchups it will, just because of the matter of fact that you can run Modest plus like specs or something like that and really just kind of click a button. You can run sub-disable sets, which are also really, really phenomenal as well. You do get Baton Pass for leagues that allow that. I think if Pult got Toxic, it would be bannable. That's just a me thing. I feel like Sub-Toxic Pult would be an absolute demon. It has 3 great abilities. 2 great abilities, 1 that's usable. But Clear Body and Infiltrator, both phenomenal abilities in Draft League. Absolutely phenomenal abilities. And like I said, plenty of momentum. I think this Pokemon is far and above the best Pokemon in the draft format, and I think a team that supports it and facilitates it well, and as long as you have great breakers in the back and like KO machines sitting in the back, I think Pult is going to succeed. And I think it's really hard to use this Pokemon bad. No, not necessarily. I think this Pokemon has actually probably a higher skill ceiling and a little bit more of a barrier to entry than something like an Urshifu, which we just talked about. So I could see in that sense, but the ability to go mix, physical, special, going more bulky, going more support, running with like Willow Hex or T-Wave Hex sets and things like that. It's just really, really great Pokemon. Absolutely love Pult. I think it's definitely number 1. And I really hope to draft it soon because I actually haven't been able to draft it much in Gen 8. Let's scroll back up though. So we kind of talked about that. We have Luke Time next saying, there's a great dissonance between using Garchomp and prepping for Garchomp. It isn't great when most teams can revenge your wallet. Celesteal is the only super top tier that isn't too scary to counter. Even with Autotomize, it's not fast or strong enough. I don't know if he's responding to someone else with a Garchomp. It isn't great when most teams can revenge wallet. I don't feel like that's true. In this generation, I really don't feel like there's a lot of true Chomp counters. That dual stab combination is really nuts, and especially in a format where you can run Mixed Chomp, and if you're playing like a fast spit F1, and you can run Fire Blast with the Life Orb for the Skarm, the Tang, all of those different big threats. I really, really don't think Garchomp has great counterplay in a Galar Dex format as much as Luke here is saying. Personally, I feel like I can scroll through all of these. What do you call it? All of these Pokemon in Galar Dex, and I feel like I can think of a way that Garchomp can push through them in some way, shape, and form with Dragon, Ground, and Fire coverage. It's almost perfect coverage. There really isn't much that can take on that combination, that stab combination plus fire coverage potentially. Even those levitating steel types or those flying steel types really just don't appreciate it in the slightest. And I think the only way to really outlast a Chomp is just crazy, raw, natural bulk, or revenging it offensively with a Scarfer that's faster than that +1 or faster than a Scarf Chomp, or just allowing no scale shot shenanigans to occur. And actually, I'm even looking at Nadex. I'm not just looking at Showdown. So maybe I'm crazy, but I really, really, really do feel strongly that Garchomp is actually just almost unguardable in a lot of instances for me. So I really do think it's a phenomenal Pokemon. Even things like Corvi are just not going to check it long term. Whether you be SD Fire Fang or just like a Life Orb, Fire Blast, or Flamethrower. So I don't agree there. Selly, I think Selly this gen is definitely worse than it was last gen, especially offensively. Obviously, we can't just auto up Z-move and then just boost through a team like crazy. Now, we do have things like Meteor Beam, but those are matchup situational. Still really solid, but matchup situational, and you're also, you know, kind of knock fodder. You get knocked. That's a useless move, basically, in that slot. In most instances, at the very least. But I do feel like Selly is still a great mid-round 1 pick here in Gen 8, whether it be Galar, at least in Galar decks, maybe not in Nat decks, maybe a little bit more towards the wheel there with Selly, but I do love Selly a lot. I think it still has great defensive utility, and just Leech Protect, Toxicking on things, just with that great coverage and its stab combination, plus fire and ground and rock, and even grass, and on both sides too, which is really, really cool. So I think Selly is still really, really good. Offensively, it definitely took a hit this gen, but that's obviously why it's not like a top 5 round 1 pick anymore. It falls a lot later because, you know, it's had that offensive kind of nerf, so it kind of pigeonholes a lot of Sellys into a more defensive role a lot of the time, and I think that's kind of why people are iffy on it. But I really love it. I think it's a little bit more versatile than people give it credit to, and just running those Leech Fat tech sets. You can run offensive. I've run AV Selly. I've even seen people run Choice Scarf Selly before and Choice Band Selly, which I think is, I think it was today I watched a Blunder Live. It was like his first video on talking about Band Selly, and I was like, oh, that's a cool idea. Maybe we get that going in draft at one point. But I love Selly. I think it's an amazing Pokemon. So I'm gonna disagree a little bit on those, and I promise there are some that I will agree with. I agree with Terrakion. I definitely agree that Selly at least has had a drop in potency. Next up, we have Matt O'Shea. Being as mad as me, saying S-Tag Goth. Stag Goth just makes me think it's like, isn't a stag a horse? It makes me think it's a horse. But we have Gothitelle up next. Shadow Tag, obviously an S-Tag is what he's talking about. And I'll agree to an extent. I think the true strength in what Gothitelle does is it forces very specific prep. And I think it forces and commands a lot of respect in the team builder. But I can understand why that can be seen as very underwhelming, especially I feel like the higher competition you play, the worse Goth is going to get, because it's not going to get ignored in the team builder. I think Goth is like the definition of a noob slayer. One of those mons that really just bullies new players because they don't prep for it. And not necessarily that it's going to sweep every time or something like that, because there are new players. Actually, really, I only think new players are going to get swept by like a CMing trick Goth. But Goth's true strength lies in that matchup where someone maybe can't afford to be Shed Shell, can't afford to be the momentum move, and they end up getting trapped by Goth and eliminating that one big threat that stops, you know, X big scary Pokemon, or at least forcing those Shed Shells so no more leftovers, no more boosts, whatever item that it would typically want to run, so that Goth can come in and, Goth can't come in and, you know, really do it dirty. But I do agree that it might be overhyped. It might be a little bit overpriced because of that upside potential and, you know, depending on the skill gap in the league. Next up, we're going to have Galar, Zapdos, and Rillaboom, which are both very interesting ones. G-Zap, I really like it. I have seen, at least on Wi-Fi, it tend to be a little bit overpriced. It's a really sick mon. I actually really, really enjoy using it. I had it with Rillaboom on a team recently in SBU, good couple months ago, before BDSP ended up even coming out, and it was a lot of fun. I really do love the momentum that grabs. Fighting Flying is a phenomenal offensive typing, and it has great natural bulk where it can pivot in on some annoying things. I've seen some cool, like, really defensive G-Zaps, which I think is cool. It has great utility in Taunt, it can bulk up, and it can really kind of punch a lot of holes through teams, and U-turn on a Pokemon like that is always going to be phenomenal in facilitating your offense. And speaking of facilitating your offense, I saw a lot of Rillaboom in this thread, and I do agree in the sense that it's not the instant win button that some people do think it is, but there are matchups where Ban Glide is kind of that insta-win herder button that you just get to click. But I think Rillaboom, even more than kind of what we were talking about with Goth and the amount of respect it forces in the team builder, I think Rillaboom really forces a certain play style that is really, really exploitable with the proper team and the proper aggression from the player. I think if you're too afraid to throw off banded knockoffs and banded U-turns on those very, very obvious telegraph switches, and getting into your strong breaker afterwards, I think you're obviously going to have a bad time. But Rillaboom, I feel like, is just much better in a role where it can knock off and U-turn, and then maybe glide to pick something off a little bit later. But I think when people try and use SD Boom and like Acro and, you know, Super stuff like that, I feel like that's where it's going to fall up a little bit more short. But I think Rillaboom's great. I absolutely love it. I think it's very aptly priced in most leagues. And I would definitely recommend trying it out, and maybe kind of thinking like, this isn't my number one, you know, herder Pokemon. This is going to facilitate and get my offense in a really good position, and really put my opponent on the back foot, which is really nice. Next up is Corviknight. Corviknight is Adjic's Bream and doesn't deserve the love it gets. I do agree a little bit. Maybe this is just me. I really struggle drafting Pokemon really high tier up there that, you know, and this is going to sound dumb after what I just said with Rillaboom, so maybe I'm being a little bit hypocritical right here. You can definitely let me know in the comments if you disagree with me and you think like, hey, well, that was a stupid take. I have a lot of stupid takes sometimes, I won't lie to you. But Corviknight is a lot like Rillaboom, and it does facilitate those very specific switches, and it gets those free U-turns. But Corviknight doesn't threaten much on its own, and obviously it's not that kind of Pokemon. It's not offensive. I think when people try and use like Corvi as like bulk up Wincon, or they use that really bad power trip set, and stuff like that, or like the agility sets and stuff like that, I think that's when Corviknight is a little bit worse than it really should be. I think what you should be doing with Corviknight 90% of the time is just clicking U-turn and Roost. And I think it, again, facilitates that offense. It's really good on fat, bounce, annoying teams, and getting in that one or two breaker that you might have on your team to kind of punch a hole and leave a dent in the opposing team before you kind of pivot back and get onto the, you know, the defensive side of the field. So I don't think it's bad. It's not my favorite Pokemon that I've drafted. I've used it a couple times, and it's done its job. So I don't think I can really complain about Corviknight being overhyped when every time I've drafted it, it's done its job. So, you know, I'm going to disagree with that one. I'll agree with Shadow Tag Gothos. See, I told you, I'm going to agree with some of your guys' takes. Here's J-Bear saying, okay, you want more. He did give me one earlier, so I guess this is a little bit after. So we're going a little bit out of order. We're a little bit crazy. We see Landorus, Sureforce and Nadex, Rillaboom in the Torn Team meta, Corviknight, Slurpuff and Whimsicott as fairies, and Latias. So we'll talk about these three right here, because we just talked about Rillaboom and Corviknight, obviously. Landorus, this is something that I actually do agree with. And something I want to do in next NCP season is I really want to unban Landorus, and I really want to unban Zamazenta. We'll talk about Zamazenta when we get there. I think I really want to unban Landorus, though, for sure. As I feel like even if you allow it in this meta, it's still the third best Pokemon. If that, you could even, you know, argue Mew, Torn T being overall better. I think the reason that people are so scared of Landorus, and he's saying in Natdex, and in Natdex I definitely agree. I haven't seen a Natdex league ban Landorus I don't know how long. But in Wi-Fi, I even think it's allowable, because the top tier Pokemon are still just better than it. I think Landorus scares people because this is the Pokemon I think is like the biggest definition of having a very low skill ceiling. I think if you gave a player who's not very good at the game, not very competent in Draft League, but maybe understands competitive Pokemon a little bit to an extent, you give them a Landorus, I think they're actually going to do well with it regardless of their record. That's the Pokemon that Landorus is. It forces KOs, and there's not much teams can do to stop it. However, I think that's where it kind of ends. I think it really does lack in that versatility. I think setup sets are bad. I'm not a big fan of Calm Mind Landorus. Swords Dance has its places and stuff like that, but if you're Sure Force, you're probably going to run just a Life Orb. You might have a U-turn on there. You might have Sludge Wave and Focus Blast and Rock Slide and, you know, things like that. You're just clicking Earth Power. You're claiming KOs. So it's a very low skill ceiling, but it doesn't have crazy upside like a Pokemon like I talked about earlier, like Dragapult has. I think Landorus actually has a lower skill ceiling than Urshifu, even potentially, and in certain scenarios and things like that. So maybe that's just me. I don't think it's too broken. I think it's very easily revengeable. And I think with Provert pivoting, it's not impossible to deal with. It's just going to be a Pokemon that's going to be very hard to consistently check defensively. And there's going to be very few teams that can do that. But you're lying to me if you're saying that there aren't already Pokemon allowed in most formats that do that. So that's something to keep in mind. And then we have Slurpuff and Whimsicott. Ass Fairies sucks to rely on. I think Dr. Slaking is going to dislike my video just because Jesse504 said this. But I do agree, actually. Not that they're bad Pokemon, right? I actually really like Whimsicott. I think Slurpuff is okay. I think what he means is them as your fairy type, because they're very bad dragon resist. any dragon with halfway decent coverage is obviously going to blow them up. I think a little bit less so on Slurpuff, and I think that's a hot take. I don't think a lot of people really like Slurpuff. I've just Slurpuff as my fairy a few times just out of necessity, and it's done its job. I've checked Urshifu single strikes with Slurpuff multiple times, just with like FizzDev, Helmet, Draining Kiss sets, and other very apt things, because that pure fairy typing is going to be a little bit nicer than like that fairy grass typing being weak to fire, which pretty much every dragon's going to have flamethrower or some kind of fire coverage on it to really blow you up, and being weak to poison 4 times and things like that, and just being generally a lot more frail than a Slurpuff. But it has great utility, and I think if you play Whimsicott in a way that it's not your defensive fairy, you're gonna have a lot more success when you play it as a fast, annoying utility pivot Pokemon that's here to Encore, U-turn, Leech, Toxic, Disrupt, just be a general nuisance to a lot of teams. So I actually do think it's actually a really solid Pokemon. I think people just shouldn't be using it as their defensive fairy. And the next up we have Latias, and this really pains me to say, because I used to love Latias, man, but I've tried to draft it a couple times recently. I drafted an OLT last season, a Nat Deck Showdown League, and I went 0-6 with it. Not like my record, like Latias didn't have a kill all season. Came to 6 games or something like that, or it might have came to all 8, I don't know. It did certain defensive roles well, but even when I tried to bring offensive, I just couldn't position KOs. It just doesn't have that raw breaking power against a very much so power crept meta here in Gen 8, where a lot of bulky balanced teams kind of live. Maybe that's just me playing with it on Showdown. Might have a little bit more success with it on Wi-Fi, where people don't tend to rely on that fat balance approach as much, in my opinion. I think Z-Moves being gone for this thing really sucks, though. Its defensive utility is great. I actually love Wish Lottie. I think Wish Lottie is a really slept-on aspect of it. Healing Wish is always a very valuable tool to have, but I do think that it's potentially overpriced or just overvalued in a lot of leagues by a lot of players. So I would definitely agree with Jesse on that one, to be fair. Okay, next up we have Latias. Let's see what Jack has to say about it, though. Latias can fill multiple roles but doesn't excel, and it usually lacks the power to enough offensively without boot. Defensively is solid, but it's not strong 6 moves to be great in a matchup. Still see it as a 16 and 18 point, which is bothering me. Yeah, I would agree. I think that's definitely fair. Next up, we have Terrakion plus Torn T. I know a lot of people really don't like Torn T, and we'll kind of talk about that one. We'll even move to the tweet I'm talking about. But we have had them in Twitch Battle League season last season, and they were my 2 kill leaders. When I went constant stress, had to rely on Edge and Hurricane was not the way at all. I wouldn't say that makes them overvalued. I think that's just you being scared to click the move. I wouldn't say it's like a down. I guess it would be a downside of the Pokemon having to rely on inaccurate moves, but they really don't. If you don't want to run those moves and you feel like you can facilitate an end game where you can click Air Slash and Rock Slide, just going to be more viable. But really, any offensive rock and flying is going to come across that issue. Let's find my good friend, just Kurt, who really has a disdain for Torn. And I feel like a lot of this is because he missed a lot of Hurricanes and ICB. I'm going to tell you right now, I disagree with this. I think Torn is amazing. It's not a Pokemon I've tried, and it's a Pokemon I really do want to try. And I'm not going to lie, I've been pretty scared because it does miss moves a lot. It's kind of just a byproduct of running Hurricane. And I know I'd get upset about it, even if it's unjustifiably so. Regeneration is the best ability in the game. And when you give it to a Pokemon with base 121 speed, I believe it's 121. I'm going to look it up because I feel stupid if it's not 121. Torn, 121, yeah. Give a Pokemon with 121 speed, great natural bulk and U-turn, regen, it's gonna be good, man. Great offensive coverage, it can go nasty, it gets taunt, it gets knockoff. This Pokemon is just glue incarnate. It's such a good glue piece, and I get it misses Hurricanes, and run fucking Air Slash if you're scared to miss Hurricanes. Like, it's a really good Pokemon. I'm sorry, Kurt, I hope we can still be friends, but I disagree. I think that Pokemon is phenomenal. Okay. First one to come to mind is Mega Scizor. It was super high when hidden power got cut, but it's certainly a good mon. It's not top 2 Mega like people are making out to be. That's fair. Because I agree in the sense that I remember when we found out hidden power was cut and gone forever, right? I do remember people being like, yo, we're gonna have to ban Mega Scizor. That's not the case. It's really not the case, especially because Mega Scizor in a lot of instances could just avoid 2-hit KOs from hidden power fires from random mons. It wasn't like you could slap hidden power fire on a mon and it was going to kill it. That thing's bulky, man. It's really bulky, it's really strong. I love Mega Scizor. On my Trick House tour run, not my Trick House tour, my Trick House run last season, where I auto promote because I got first seed, I freaking love that mon. It was absolutely amazing. Really, really good in Gen 8. I've drafted it a few times. I had Mega Scizor, Zygarde in that league. I had Mega Scizor, Zapdos in another Showdown league. So I definitely think it's great, but I do agree in the sense that we did think it was going to be a lot better than it did end up, becoming. So I agree with Endless there. Next up, we have Garchomp is ass. So, this is a bad take from Mr. Josh A. Gulch, but I don't know what Garchomp did to him, what Garchomp didn't do when he was using him. I really, really have no idea. However, I know he has a really, really, really big hatred for this Pokemon, like a huge hate boner for it. Garchomp's amazing, man. That 102 speed tier, we kind of already talked about Garchomp. So, we literally already talked about Garchomp. I just want Josh to know I disagree. We talked about Ultra. Rillaboom and Corviknight. Corviknight is a glorified Vullaby. So we talked about those, but we do have one that says, I think Excadrill is softened. Not that it's bad, it's just over-tiered a lot, in my opinion. Which is definitely interesting. I think, so maybe this is just me, and maybe this is just me not valuing spin as much this generation. I agree in the sense that I think Excadrill isn't as good off of sand as it was in past generations. I think it was a lot more valuable having that Mold Breaker, having that spinner in a generation where hazards were more potent. Now, I don't think that Excadrill is worth drafting off of sand and what do you call it? Galar decks. And I don't think that's or just Gen 8 in general. I don't think that's a crazy thing to mention or a crazy thing to say. But I still feel like it's incredibly good. And I don't think Aquarius is saying that it's not good here. Like, I think she's still acknowledging that it's a good Pokemon. But it being over-tiered, I don't know. Because you also don't want to give incredible value for an Excadrill that is so good in sand. I think you have to tier with that in mind. Now, that's obviously a very slippery slope. Because I remember back in, Gen 7, when people were, like, early in the gen, to be fair, and in like lower skill leagues, like Wi-Fi leagues and like just lower skill showdown leagues, you'd see like Lucha in tier 1 with all the Tapus, because people didn't want people to get tier 2 Lucha with a Tapu because they felt like it was too crazy a value. I don't think the jump is as big with Lucha without a Tapu as with one. But I don't know. I don't think you can really drop Excadrill, as I feel like the value just becomes fucking immense. And if you're giving me like, a much cheaper Excadrill in exchange, and I don't get sand, I'm still taking that because it's just a cheaper drill with great utility still. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. I still think it's great. Next up, we have Soul Blaze saying Zeraora, in my opinion, gets picked super early, and yeah, the speed is nice, but it almost never carries as hard as I expect to. The only time I ever see it do work is when people misplay in front of it. I don't agree. I love Zera, man. Pult by that 1 point. Obviously, there's things faster, Selgor, Electro, blah, 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 Ninjask, but nothing good. This is the last good Pokemon at the highest speed tier. Regieleki, I guess. This Pokemon's amazing. Plasma Fist plus Knock plus CC, Blaze Kick, and go Calm Mind. It has Grass Knot as coverage for grounds. Subtoxic is awesome. Really fast Taunt. It can Volt Switch. This Pokemon is a phenomenal Pokemon. I absolutely love using this thing. Subtoxic Zera is the best Zera, but there's, plenty of versatility I can go with. This thing, love the addition of heavy duty boots this gen. Just not having to take Hazard Chip makes this thing an absolute demon to deal with, because it is so hard to force chip on it. It is so hard to force chip on this Pokemon if it's played correctly with boots. So that's something to keep in mind. And it's a great disruptor. It's a phenomenal disruptor, and just knocking things off and being a big nuisance. So I love Zera. I think it's incredibly versatile offensively, and it offers a lot of utility to a team. If people don't just like Herder, I'm Life Orb every week. So I don't know. I love Zera. I think it's amazing. It knocks off, it draws big Plasma Fist. It also has Play Rough for good coverage as well. So like this thing just, it's very good. It is a very good Pokemon. So I'm gonna disagree there. We already talked about Torn being really upset, and all he's telling him he's wrong, largely. So next up, we have Lucas saying Zygarde and Torn T. We already talked about Torn T, but we'll talk about Zygarde. Like, both look good, but they don't do shit. I've used Zygarde, and all it does is start setting up subs until your opponent has enough. If you search the D-Dance and Coil, it's not enough to pressure something. I think that people go into every game assuming Zygarde is going to set up and win game, which it will in some games. It 100% will. I think that people very much so, at least on Wi-Fi, when they draft Zygarde, heavily lean on like really offensive sets. Like it would, you know, typically run last gen on Wi-Fi with the addition of Z moves and things like that. And it's definitely worse offensively this gen. I won't cap there, but I think it's so good defensively this gen. I love Zygarde. I'm a big Zygarde stan. One of my favorite tier 1 Pokemon to use. Look how bulky this thing is with this phenomenal stab combination. The most spammable move in the game. This is the best. These things down. We sub-toxic and protect, we sub-toxic and coil or D-dance. We can glare things. Something I will say, and I don't think Zygarde's overrated. I think a very specific core is overrated. And I know Matt drafted this, and I hope Matt doesn't hate me. I think Zygarde Fini is a bad core, and I don't think you should draft it. I think Zygarde loves spamming status, and I know Zygarde isn't, Misty Terrain isn't always going to be on the field. But the fact that I have to play around it, the fact that I feel a little bit more pressure to bring more offensive variants and things like that, really just kind of, I don't know, it irks me the wrong way. I really don't like that core. But I think if you lean on Zygarde's fat, bulky annoyingness, and you really build a really solid balanced build around it, this Pokemon's so hard to kill, and it's such a phenomenal just nuisance for your opponent to deal with. And you can still be those double dance sets and things like that. You just have to facilitate that endgame, and you have to go in the game with that in mind. You can't just send out Zygarde and Herder win the game as much as you'd like to think. Now, again, there is matchups where you can do that, but against most teams, you're not going to be able to do that if there is an arrows resist. So I think you need to facilitate that endgame before you set it up. And so I think Zygarde just takes a little bit more thought in that sense. So next up we have Liv. Let's see if Liv says anything else. Terrak's fine this gen. Not gonna let try with more. You get like Lunala and BBL. You'll like Infinite more. Okay. As for my choice, it's Glowking. Don't get me wrong. Love Glowking. It's amazing. Seeing people put it 16 out of 18 or 17 out of 20 is delusional. I do agree, honestly. I think that Glowking is awesome. I haven't tried it, so I just typed in Glowking. I haven't tried it, so I could be completely wrong here. It's the wrong one. He's the happy one. Where's the one that forgot to take his antidepressants? There he is. I think it's great. I think it's an absolute nuisance. I think it's annoying. It sits in the field, but it's not passive, and it's strong, and it has great coverage. But would I say this is the glue to my team? This is my centerpiece. This is what I'm going to use to win my games? No, I'll be honest. I would not. I think it is. I think I've at least come to the agreement that it is better than all of the other slows. But I think putting it at like a 14-point mark is perfect. At least for me. I don't know. I could not imagine drafting this thing at the same point tier as other, like, you know, I guess like how, I don't know. I never know how to explain other than like tier 1. Obviously they're not tier 1 because not doing tiers, but you know what I mean? Like those upper echelon type Pokemon. I just still don't consider that. Maybe I need to see the light. Maybe I need to draft, but everybody fucking puts it hella high point value and drafts it immediately. So maybe I won't ever try it, and I'll just be an infinite hater of Glowking. But I agree with Liv's take here. Lando, I was tier 4s. I hate Zamazi bands, but at least Lando has a ton of playtest proving. It does. It does have a ton of playtest proving, and I think that waifu people don't realize that it is quite literally never banned at this point in Showdown Leagues. Melmetal mostly on Wi-Fi. I think that was a phase back in the day. I actually think Melmetal slept on. So I think the opposite of Liv there. I think a lot of people don't draft Melmetal anymore, or very much so undervalue it because it was so overhyped earlier in the gen. And I think AV Melm is the truth. I think Toxic Tech Melm is the truth. Awesome one. I really love Melmetal. Let's keep moving. Shuckle and Liv agreeing, saying why is Lando I not allowed when, what do you call it is? Kyurem, Terrakion, Tapu Fini, and Corviknight. We have this from Gohan right here. We obviously already talked about Corviknight and Terrakion extensively. Kyurem, I actually do agree because I remember an APA this season on Wi-Fi at least. And I'm not too familiar with Showdown when it comes to Kyurem and how many people think, how many people overrated or anything like that. But I remember we had this at like 15 points. I don't remember the exact point value. And Mountay in the first draft, he was like, I can't believe I got this at this point value in round 1. This is a steal. I don't think it's that good. Like, it's a great Pokemon. I don't think it's bad, but I don't think it's, again, it's a like a Glow King syndrome. It's a Pokemon that's phenomenal in a standard Smogon setting. So I feel like people think that transfers over to draft a lot better than it really does. Again, I love Kyurem. I've drafted it multiple times. I think it's a great second hitter in that 1-2 punch of, you know, your scary mons. But would I say this is like my best Pokemon? I'm drafting this round 1. No, I really wouldn't. I still think it's pretty consistently checked by Fat Steels, just like it was last gen. I think it has a lot more versatility, a lot more stayability on the stayability a word. I don't think it's a fucking word. But you know, is able to stick around a lot longer with boots. I think spec set's obviously great. But the buffs that it got made it just like a solid low end, you know, tier 1-ish type mon. I wouldn't say that like this is like, you know, upper echelon of draft league type mon with it getting freeze dry spear, D-Dance, and boots. I think it just made it infinitely better. Just not as good as a lot of people would like to think that it is. I don't know. That's just me. Oh, and then I totally forgot. Tapu Fini. I used to be on the Tapu Fini is kind of overrated train. I used to be on that train, but then I used it, and it's awesome. I love the utility that this thing offers, man. With Knock plus Madness and Taunt, it can Calm Mind up. Getting Draining Kiss this gem was legit awesome. Giving it a little bit more recovery. Obviously, that Fini's biggest downside is that it has no way of keeping itself healthy outside of, you know, passive means, which is a little bit unfortunate. But again, really not the end of the world if you think about it. It gets Haze for great utility. You can Iron Defense Calm Mind for, you know, a great Double Dance set and things like that. It obviously can't like Toxic or Rest very easily, but I think there are ways around that. And I think the biggest annoyance when it comes to drafting with Fini is drafting a team that really wants to status things. Or when people draft that Fini partner that likes to drop Dracos, obviously that's not going to be very ideal. But I think Fini is amazing. I really do like it. Also, Defog, which is another option. But we live in a generation where boots exist. It gets Trick as well for even more utility, Sword Power for even more, you know, setup capabilities. I like Fini a lot. It's really bulky. It's really annoying. It has pretty surprising, I almost said survivability as well, despite having no recovery too. Lefties and Protect and Draining Kiss and, you know, shenanigans like that. So I really do like the mod. I think Fini's awesome. So I'm going to disagree there. I agree with the Kyurem though. Okay. Zygarde. Talked about Gliscor. We talked about Zygarde. Gliscor. John doesn't like Gliscor. This one's not in Gen 8, at least in Galar decks, but at least in the Showdown scene, this Pokemon's amazing. I think John's capping. I think John doesn't use it well, so he thinks it's bad. Gliscor is a Pokemon on my first ever championship team. Fun fact, way back in the day. In Gen 7, I had a Gliscor and a Koko and Empoleon and Reuniclus and a bunch of cool stuff. I had a Volcarona. That was awesome. It was a really fun team. Haxorus. Haxorus is the GOAT. But this Pokemon's amazing, obviously, with that Poison Heal ability. It's phenomenal Phys-Def bulking, you know, really being able to spec in that Spadef. Great natural speed, tier 95. It can Facade, Knock, Taunt, Earthquake, SD. Has great coverage. Can be a general nuisance. It can Double Dance in weird, you know, gimmicky matchups. It can U-turn. It can set up rocks. This thing's, again, Glue Piece incarnate. If, like, this is my best Pokemon, like, offensively, obviously I'm in a bad spot, but I think you just have to draft a little bit more, you know, not lower tier offense, but, you know, different ways of breaking through teams than, like, my first Pokemon is going to be my win con every week. That kind of thing. It's just a great Glue Piece. You see, Spectral, Terrakion, and Heatran are going to be my top 3 from Incog. Good lord, I've been going for 38 minutes. I don't know how far in the thread I am. Let's see, we're going to scroll down, then we'll come back to Incog. Oh my god. I hope a lot of these are Pokemon that we've talked about. We see Spectre, Terrakion, Heatran. I think y'all know I hate Spectre. I think it sucks. I think it does definitely have a higher skill ceiling. I think that good players have been able to use Spectre really well. Personally, I hate it. I can't use it. I've never seen someone use it well against me, and I've never been scared of it in a team builder. Never. Maybe it's because I drafted Licky on every draft, and I think it's a phenomenal check, obviously not being able to be taunted by it, or, you know, disabled, I believe, either. I think that's how Oblivious work. I don't know. But maybe it's just via the teams I draft. I don't think Spectre is very good. I don't think it can force progress if people play correctly, unless they just have a bad spec matchup. And obviously, if they have a bad spec matchup, it's going to force a little bit of progress. But again, I really have never, ever in my life been super worried about a Spectre. Heatran, I'm gonna disagree with Mission Incog, though. I Love Heatran. The defensive utility, the offensive utility on this thing. Fire Steel is a phenomenal typing. This thing's strong even when you're defensive and you're throwing off lava plumes and magma storms, then protecting and toxicking, getting up rocks. Running Choice Scarf or Specs Eruption is an absolute nuke in a lot of matchups and always commands respect in the team building. I think Heatran's one of the most annoying Pokemon to build for because of that defensive and offensive utility that it does offer. Hidden Power being gone is great, so, you know, things can't catch on switching for a nice little tweak KO. Like, you know, different fairies and things like that. You know, you might want to switch it on otherwise. Excuse me. Jeez. That's taking time. I've been recording for too long. But it can burn things with Plume, Swish. Like I said, it can Toxic, Protect, and get up rocks. Just a great Pokemon. I really like it. I like it on, obviously, Grassy Terrain teams. It has great synergy with Rillaboom, with obviously them breaking off for each other, covering each other's weaknesses, as well as Heatran getting Nature Power, which is always a cool tech to, you know, blow up a water type with Nature Power Energy Ball. So I love Heatran. I think it's amazing. It's one of my favorite Pokemon to draft in general. We talked about Rillaboom already from Galeta. He says some of the best priority in the game, but grass offensively and in general is pretty ass. Plus, it's usually probably super high. I think that's definitely a fair point, though. The fact that grass offensively and defensively in some matchups, besides that very important ground resistance, is pretty ass. But I do think you need that fat grass, though, or something at least to be that good ground resist. Celesteela, while it's incredible, I think most of the time teams just ignore key abilities like Magnet Pull or just locking moves in general. We already talked about Silly, but I think this is a really weird take because there's only a few viable Pokemon that get that ability, and a proper Silly set is either going to be like Wakan or potentially just be Shed Shell for those things. So I don't think it's as straightforward as in like OU where Silly isn't as good because you see a lot more mags running around potentially if that is the meta. But Corv / Mandy, more so Corv, both kill your momentum anytime U-turn isn't clicked. That is a fair point, and I think that is the biggest downside to both of these Pokemon. Again, I like both of them. I don't think they're terrible, but I do agree in the sense that if you're not clicking U-turn, you're roosting, you're allowing that thing in that breaks either of these Pokemon, you're usually in a bad spot. So I do think that they're big momentum suckers, and I think Corvi, if it got Toxic, it might be a little bit better in that sense, and I think Mandibuzz, that's why it might be a little bit less of a momentum sucker. Plus, Mandibuzz gets Stab, Foul Play, and things like that. It's not set up fodder for a lot of things. Those are just things to keep in mind. We're going to see Melmetal from John Jr. We already talked about Melmetal. I think it's actually underrated, personally. We're going to see Hayes say he agrees. Spectre, not as much anymore, but when it came out, everyone was hyping it so hard, saying it was going to be broken. I think if Spectre had any coverage or Toxic, it would be really good, but it's just missing out on that one tool. This one, though, we're going to have a little bit more of a hot take in Kyurem-Black. I agree it should be banned, but when we allow other broken mons, it just becomes underwhelming in comparison to other stuff. Even with some regular ones like Pult or Urshifu. Now, if you're talking about from an Uber's League perspective, I can get it. It's an underwhelming Uber. If you're drafting as an Uber Pokemon, and I have a Palkia and BBL, and you just have a Kyurem-Black, my Uber is better than yours, for sure. However, I think it is a lot better than Pult and Urshifu, personally. Unless you're, like, doing, like, WPF complex bans where it can't use, Icicle Spear on Tuesdays and it can only use Hone Claw's Ice Beam on Wednesdays. I think it's really good, as long as you're not like, you know, super complex banning. If you're just taking base Kyurem-Black and you're putting in a league where you allow Pult or Urshifu and I have first pick, I'm taking base Kyurem-Black and I'm DDing, I'm winning the game, throwing off big freeze dries, throwing off big old Icicle Spears. So I definitely disagree there. I think that Kyurem is leagues above these Pokemon. If we're talking about like, and then, you know, with other broken mons, like objective Ubers, yeah, it's obviously just not as good, especially in a draft setting. We're gonna see this one. We're gonna see so much track hate. Second on my all-time key leaderboard. If anything, it's underrated. No, the mon sucks. As long as Mega Lopunny still gets drafted, it's overrated. Period. And still is good on paper, and that seems to be what it wants to do. That's a hot take with Lop. I know a lot of people actually don't like Lop. Oh, so I guess it's not a hot take. Maybe I'm the hot take for loving Mega Lopunny. I think that Pokemon's sick. Obviously, it lost return and frustration this gem, which is a big hit to it, obviously, with that reliable normal stat. But it still gets Facade, which is something that was going to run a lot of time. And if you really need that oomph and power, you could be a little bit risky and run Mega Kick. Or you can also run Strength, but if you're running Strength, you might as well run Facade. But I think what saved this Pokemon from really falling into mediocrity and kind of being a super mid Nat Dex Mega is the fact that it got U-turn in close combat. Getting a little bit more of a reliable fighting stat is really, really nice. Not having to risk those misses anymore and just being a little bit weaker, I think is honestly a lot better. And being able to grab a little bit better of momentum with U-turn than Baton Pass is awesome because you're forcing your own progress. That bulky Psychic that was coming in to check you otherwise is now taking 35-40% from that U-turn, and it's into a KO range of Facade. So I think it actually does 100% make up for the loss of return. I think Megalop is still as good as it ever was. I think that one's amazing. I absolutely love using it. It gets great utility moves like Encore, which is great with its speed tier. Also Healing Wish, so really, really solid utility as well. Even if it's not defensive utility, it has its uses utility-wise. I like Lop a lot, so maybe that's just me. Let me know what you think about it. Manaphy, that's it. That's the tweet. Well, Manaphy sucks in Gen 8 in general because no Tail Glow. So I don't think anybody's overrating in Gen 8. I do agree in Gen 7, I think it was a little bit overhyped, especially in the Wi-Fi community. I'm really not big on Manaphy in the slightest. I think the biggest plus side to Manaphy was when people overprep for Tail Glow 3 attack Z move and then got smashed like CM Rest, Rain Dance or something like that, or like some cheese. But I was never a big Manaphy fan personally, so I'll agree there, at least if we're talking about Gen 7. Spectre's super overhyped. There we go. We talked about that. We have Gregular saying Tapu Koko without hesitation. I know in the Galar Dex, what tour did the Showdown community do that was Galar Dex? Was it Cash Gang? Was there like some kind of LD tour? It was something like that where Koko had like ridiculous usage. It was on like almost every team because people got to build their own teams. And I agree. I think people thought Koko was a lot better in Galar Dex than it really is. I still think Koko is very good. I don't think Koko's bad in the slightest. I think it still grabs very great momentum. It's a great facilitator of offense. And it does have great matchups potentially in some instances. And with Boots, it's a great pivot. And it's a great disruptor. But obviously, it's just not as good as it was offensively last gen. And I think that's obviously a pretty big downside. But we're gonna have Count Riario saying easily Mew. And I'm gonna say I agree. I love Mew. I think Mew's great, but I agree. I think people put Mew on this fucking pedestal where they're like, this was the Pokemon that everybody said was the best before. So it's still the best now. And I don't think so. And I think we really, myself included, when I just recently drafted it, I think we really overhyped the versatility of Mew because I feel like we have it pigeonholed into like 3 roles tops, but usually 2 or 1 depending on our build. Really have it pigeonholed where it's doing the same shit just with a couple different moves every week. It's so good defensively that I feel like offensive just isn't worth it a lot of times, especially because you just don't have the power to break through things at +1 and +2 that you think you do. Plus you just don't have the coverage a lot of the time to fit the moves you need plus Roost. And if it's an offensive, it's a setup variant. It can't just raw break through things like another Pixie like a Victini can. Just because it's not very strong. Without a boost to its name, and it loses that defensive utility for like Life or Mew. You're definitely not running Specs because you lose that, or like Specs are banned or anything like that, because again you lose that utility that really makes Mew shine. So I think Mew is really held on the pedestal because of the capability to do everything, but I don't think that people are recognizing that it doesn't do everything in practice as good as some people think it does. So that's just me. Subtile Blade says Deoxys speed. Never had trouble dispatching it. I will admit I haven't seen top level players wielding it. I love Dio speed. I think 180 is a speed tier. The fact that I barely have to invest to outspeed base 100 Scarfers, I think is actually, I don't even know if you have to invest for that. You might not even have to invest. The fact that I can just outspeed everything and go minus speed is really, really cool. It has phenomenal coverage, phenomenal utility, gets all the hazards. It actually got T-Spikes in BDSP, so if leagues are playing with that, it got that on top of... No, actually, Dio Defense might have been the only one to get that, but I know it at least has Spikes and Rocks. It can Ash Plant and Calm Mind. It can Thunder Wave. It can fast taunt the game. It can be like stall breaking sets, which is actually really solid. And again, despite it not having great bulk or great offenses, we can invest in those fully without any hesitation because of the fact that we're so damn fast. So I really like Deoxys speed personally. Man, I am getting tired. I think we can get this before an hour though, right? I think we have Fran, and then yeah, we only have a few more. So Fran's gonna talk about a few. Okay, and the quote teachings are kind of mean because I was gonna carve from our bowling, but for real, I think Age/slash overrated as fuck. It's a steel that doesn't have any utility at all, has no momentum, no recovery, not even lead seed like Steelhead. I know it's offensively really good with Ghost being broken and CC's good coverage, but just so slow. The only way it can reliably kill one mon is Shadow Sneak cleaning, which is one thing really it's really good at. It's not a mon I'd ever want to use because it doesn't do anything of use. I know you can use a second steel, but this is a hot take from Mr. Fran here. I do not agree. I think Aegislash is utility incarnate. This Pokemon can spec into so many different roles as a bulky steel, and I don't think lack of recovery is something we can really punish a steel for, in the sense that most steels don't get that. I think if you pair it with proper wish support and ways of keeping it healthy, Aegislash is great defensively, has phenomenal utility in the sense that it can really toxic and wear things down. Metal Sound's an awesome set. I've used Magnet Rise even. Aquarius showed me a really cool set the other night where she ran like Block, Spite, and PP stalled some shit. It can obviously SD up. It can be physical or special. It can be that breaker. It can be that fat wall. Maybe it's just me personally because I love using AG, but I feel like AG has great utility, and punishing a steal because it doesn't, or saying a steal is bad because it doesn't get recovery is a bit of a hot take in my opinion. Now, if you want to say it doesn't get rocks, that's fair. I think drafting steals like AG or Selly or Melmetal, or drafting a ground like Zygarde, the other ground dragon, or Flygon, I guess, the other ground dragon, but you know, less so because it's a little bit lower tiered of Pokemon. But I think that does like kind of force you into a tough spot in drafting and getting other rockers, so I'll agree there. But to say that it doesn't have utility is a very interesting take here from Fran. I think AG is amazing. We see Licky from Czech, so I'm not even going to entertain it. Not even going to entertain it. It's a wrong take. It's a bad thing to say. Look at me. I said talking reckless because he is. That is the best normal, bulky normal in Draft League. We see young Bill Nye talking about Mega Lopunny. Really hates Regular Lopunny. But we already talked about that a little bit. I liked it. Based opinion incoming. I don't think Clef is a great mod. I think it depends on your playstyle. Me personally, I don't think I would draft Clef round 1, but I think it's not fair to deny that Clef is like a phenomenal glue piece, incredibly versatile and incredibly annoying to deal with on the right kind of draft. I don't think you can just slap Clef onto any team and be like, it is good now. But I think really fat annoying builds are really going to benefit from Clef. Like I know Matt has it with like Glow King and UBL, which is a pretty cool partner. He also has it with Garchomp to pair with a really Garchomp Pharaoh, which is, you know, a really cool Dragon Fairy Steel. So there's definitely obviously great ways of using Clef. Maybe it's not, you know, like a top end round 1 pick, but it's definitely good towards the bottom round 1 or at a wheel or something like that. I think I would be a little bit more likely to draft Clef. So I definitely don't think it's bad at all. I think Clef is still very good, even if it's not like a me Pokemon. Now let's look through the quote retweets. We have a couple. One of them is me, so we have like 3 max. We'll see. Speed Boost Blaze. See, look at that. Mew fight. We already talked about that. Regielike. I think this is what he's talking about, the joke. I wouldn't even say it's overhyped because I feel like people at this point realize it really sucks. But maybe it's me that just ultra hates it. But we see Speed Boost Blaziken. That'll be the last one from Rager Bonsai. He's gonna see Speed Boost Blaziken. This is a take I've seen from a few people, and I think it's really wrong. I think people see that Blaziken fell off in Smogon because the metagame, like the OU metagame, just is not very hospitable to it. But I think if you just look at it from a draft league perspective and you see, oh shit, these things that check Blaziken aren't on every team. They're on one team. And the reason the Blaziken is so tough is because it has such crazy 4 move slot syndrome in a Smogon setting where you have to account for multiple big different defensive threats that are going to potentially switch it and deal with it. If I'm fighting a Toxapex in in a draft league game, and I'm not fighting a Lottie like you might want to pack coverage for in OU, I can run Earthquake or Thunder Punch so much more freely than, you know, wanting to slot on that knockoff for the Lottie on top of that. So I think that's where Blaziken has really struggled in OU, because that kind of coverage choice, as well as having to do subs and potentially either Sword Dance or Protect, is a little bit tough. And I think maybe deciding between Sword Dance and Protect can be kind of tough, but I feel like that just comes with maturing as a builder. I think that Speed Boost Blaze should always be banned. I've had some pretty extensive conversations about this with some Wi-Fi people. I know Eco definitely is not like, is definitely a person who really thinks it should be allowed, and I know they allowed it in Pack, and I thought that was crazy when I played in that league. But yeah, I think Speed Boost Blaziken's definitely pretty broken. But yeah, that's gonna be it. I think we got just under an hour. We talked about all of them. Now, obviously, we didn't go over everybody's, but we skimmed through them all, and we, you know, tried not to cover the same Pokemon twice. Oh wait, we have one more. Shuckles. So let's see. Talk about Terrakion. Talk about Corviknight, Zeraora, Nidoqueen, Cinder. This is a list. Shuckle, do you think any Pokemon are good? I would say Terrakion's more overrated, not overhyped. So I want to know what his distinction between overrated and overhyped is, because maybe that's just me. In my head, I was like, same shit. The overhyped just sounds different. Because I feel like they're the same thing almost. But we see him saying Drapion is overhyped, maybe in the sense that like everybody sees it as like the quintessential dark type because it also has that poison type and great roll compressor. I feel like that's justifiable. I feel like that mon's great. Nidoqueen, another phenomenal Pokemon, great defensively, great offensive utility, T-spikes and rocks, really good you know, defensive nuisance. Vapo, it can be definitely passive, and I think a lot of people like, you know, think it's like catch all checked everything, and I think they can kind of get taken advantage of in a lot of instances because of it. But I definitely don't think it's like, you know, a bad Pokemon. Cinderace, I love Cinderace. I'm not gonna take any Cinderace slander. That one's amazing. That's my all-time kill leader, even though it's ugly and it looks really weird. I don't know. Registeel definitely can be pretty passive. Maybe, you know, exploitable, and a lot of people, you know, see it again as like it's just my lower tiered Steel type that's just a Brox. I'd probably rather have Steelix than Registeel personally. Then we see Incineroar, which is definitely interesting because I think Incineroar is one of those Pokemon, every time at least I build for it, in my head, even if like offensively it doesn't 2AK everything on my team, nothing likes taking Knock plus Flare Blitz. Just nothing. Knock is such an annoying move, and Incineroar is such a good Knock spammer in my opinion. And it's just a really great disruptor, and it really annoys me when I play it. Galar Weezing, I agree. I think that one sucks. Licky's a wrong opinion. Alolan Persian, I think people do tend to kind of overvalue Alolan Persian and Parting Shot in general. And I see a lot of Alolan Persian into Pokemon that are not going to set up. Milotic and Piloswine, I think Milotic is definitely another kind of more passive water that people kind of overhype when it comes to its bulk. And you kind of see the whole like Flame Orb annoying to break, but then it's Flame Orb and it's taking Burn plus Rocks plus maybe even a Spike plus the hit, and it's forced to recover 90% of the time and just loses momentum, and if you're not, you're getting 2 KO by physical moves. So that's interesting to think of. I like Piloswine a lot. It's a low tier ground, so I don't know if I agree with that one. And then maybe Koko, we kind of talked about that one. Whew. Now we're done. Right before an hour too. We got 56 minutes on my recording right now, or 57. But thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what Pokemon you think is the most overhyped, overrated. What's the distinction between the two? Let me know that too in the comments below. But let me know what you think about these kinds of videos. Let me know another topic that you would like to see. Let me know if you think my opinions are bad and what you disagree with. I want comments. I also would like a like and a sub. I would really appreciate it a ton. I hope you guys enjoyed me rambling for an entire hour. Maybe this will give you something good to put on the background while you do some homework, or you know, maybe a long drive. I listen to YouTube videos while I drive and stuff like that to my you know, like if I'm going to my mom's house, or I'm taking a road trip or something like that. I'm usually listening to a YouTube video, so maybe this will help you out with that. But let me know what you guys think of these kinds of videos and give me more ideas for them, because I thought this one was fun and I love the interaction with you guys on Twitter. But thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Later.